The first time soldiers heard it, they didn't understand what they were looking at. There was no pilot, no engine roar like a traditional aircraft, just a strange, mechanical buzzing cutting through the sky. And then, suddenly, impact, explosion, chaos. Long before modern warfare embraced drones, the United States had already built something terrifyingly ahead of its time, a weapon that could fly itself into the enemy. This was the Kettering Bug, and for those who witnessed it, it felt less like technology and more like something out of the future. To understand how shocking this was, you have to remember what warfare looked like in 1914. World War I had turned into a brutal stalemate. Trenches stretched for miles across Europe, and millions of soldiers were stuck in muddy, deadly deadlock. Every advance cost thousands of lives. Every innovation aimed at breaking this stalemate was desperately pursued. And while Europe focused on artillery, machine guns, and chemical weapons, the United States quietly began experimenting with something entirely different. America hadn't even fully entered the war yet when some of its brightest minds started thinking beyond traditional weapons. What if, instead of risking pilots, you could send an unmanned aircraft? What if you could strike deep behind enemy lines without warning, without interception? It was a radical idea at the time, almost unbelievable. But in true American fashion, innovation didn't wait for permission. Behind this bold idea was an inventor named Charles Kettering, a man known for pushing technological boundaries. Working with the Dayton Wright Company and supported by the U.S. Army, Kettering set out to create something that had never existed before, a pilotless aircraft capable of delivering explosives with precision. This wasn't just engineering, it was a completely new way of thinking about warfare. Instead of risking human lives in dangerous missions, this machine would carry out the task alone, guided not by a person, but by a system. The result was what came to be known as the Kettering Bug, a small, lightweight biplane made primarily of wood and papier-mâché, designed to be cheap, expendable, and effective. It had a wingspan of about 15 feet and was powered by a simple engine. But what made it truly revolutionary wasn't its appearance, it was how it operated. This wasn't a remote-controlled device. There were no radio signals guiding it. Instead, it used a mechanical system to calculate distance. Engineers would set the number of engine revolutions needed to reach a target. Once that number was reached, the engine would cut off, the wings would detach, and the payload, essentially a flying bomb, would drop directly onto the enemy. It was simple, ingenious, and terrifying. To modern audiences, this might sound primitive, but in the context of 1917 and 1918, this was cutting-edge innovation. Aviation itself was still in its infancy. Most planes were fragile, unreliable, and required skilled pilots just to stay in the air. And yet here was a machine designed to fly itself across miles of battlefield and strike a target without any human intervention. It was, in many ways, the ancestor of the cruise missile and modern military drones. The United States military saw enormous potential in this concept. At a time when the war in Europe had become a deadly stalemate, any advantage, especially one that could break through enemy lines, was invaluable. The Kettering Bug promised something revolutionary, the ability to strike deep into enemy territory without risking American pilots. It represented not just a new weapon, but a new philosophy, one that prioritized innovation, efficiency, and technological superiority. But creating such a machine was far from easy. The technology of the time imposed serious limitations. There were no advanced guidance systems, no GPS, no reliable communication once the aircraft was launched. Every detail had to be calculated before takeoff. Wind conditions, engine performance, and mechanical precision all had to align perfectly. Even the slightest miscalculation could send the bug off course. And yet, despite these challenges, the team behind it pushed forward, driven by the belief that they were building the future of warfare. Testing the Kettering Bug revealed both its promise and its flaws. Some launches were successful, demonstrating that the concept could work. Others failed dramatically, with the aircraft crashing prematurely or veering off course. These inconsistencies highlighted just how ambitious the project was. But even in its failures, the Bug proved something important. The idea of an unmanned weapon was not only possible, it was inevitable. What made the Kettering Bug particularly unsettling for those who understood it was the psychological impact it could have on the battlefield. Traditional weapons were visible, predictable to some extent. Soldiers could hear artillery, see aircraft, anticipate attacks. But the Bug introduced something new: unpredictability. A small, pilotless machine appearing suddenly in the sky, delivering destruction without warning, without a human face behind it. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a concept that changed how war could be perceived. Even though the Kettering Bug never saw active combat before the end of World War I, its development sent a clear message. The United States was not just participating in the war, it was thinking ahead, investing in technologies that would define the future. While others focused on the present battlefield, American engineers were already imagining what came next. It's important to understand that this kind of forward-thinking innovation didn't happen in isolation. The early 20th century was a time of rapid technological progress, and the United States was becoming a hub for engineering breakthroughs. Figures like Orville Wright, who had already helped pioneer powered flight, were connected to these developments. In fact, the Wright brothers' legacy played a role in inspiring projects like the Kettering Bug. The idea that humans could conquer the skies had already been proven. Now, the question was how far that control could go. The collaboration between engineers, inventors, and the military created an environment where bold ideas could be tested. The Kettering Bug wasn't just a weapon, it was a product of this unique moment in American history, where creativity and necessity came together. And while it may not have changed the outcome of World War I directly, it laid the groundwork for future advancements that absolutely would. In many ways, the Bug represents a turning point. It marked the beginning of a shift from traditional, human-centered warfare to a more technological, automated approach. Today, drones are a central part of modern military strategy. They conduct surveillance, carry out strikes, and operate in environments too dangerous for human pilots. And all of that can be traced back, in part, to this early experiment. There's also something fascinating about the simplicity of the Kettering Bug's design. Unlike modern drones, which rely on complex electronics and software, the Bug operated entirely on mechanical principles. Gears, counters, and basic aerodynamics were enough to create a functioning, unmanned weapon. It's a reminder that innovation doesn't always require advanced technology. Sometimes it's about using what you have in new and creative ways. Of course, the Bug had its limitations. Accuracy was a major issue, and the lack of real-time control meant that it couldn't adapt once it was launched. These factors made it less practical for immediate deployment. But even with these shortcomings, the concept itself was groundbreaking. It challenged existing assumptions about what was possible in warfare. And perhaps most importantly, it demonstrated a uniquely American approach to problem solving, one that embraces experimentation, takes risks, and looks beyond conventional limits. The idea of sending a pilotless aircraft into enemy territory might have seemed unrealistic to many at the time, but to Kettering and his team, it was simply the next step. As the war came to an end in 1918, the Kettering Bug project was ultimately shelved. With the immediate need for such a weapon gone, attention shifted elsewhere. But the knowledge gained from the project didn't disappear. It became part of a larger body of research that would influence future developments in aviation and military technology. In the decades that followed, The concept of unmanned flight continued to evolve. World War II saw the introduction of more advanced guided weapons. The Cold War pushed technological innovation even further, and eventually, drones became a standard tool in military operations around the world. What once seemed like science fiction became reality. Looking back, it's clear that the Kettering Bug was ahead of its time. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't widely used, but it represented a vision, a glimpse of what warfare could become. And that vision was born from a willingness to think differently, to challenge the status quo, and to invest in the future.
For the soldiers who might have seen or heard it, the Kettering Bug must have been something almost surreal. A machine flying without a pilot, carrying destruction silently through the air. It blurred the line between technology and imagination. And even today, there's something eerie about that image, a reminder of how innovation can change not just how wars are fought, but how they are experienced. And maybe that's the most powerful part of this story. Not just the invention itself, but what it represents. A moment when human ingenuity pushed beyond the limits of its time. A moment when the future briefly appeared in the skies of the past. Because long before drones became a symbol of modern warfare, before satellites, before advanced targeting systems, there was the Kettering Bug. A simple, fragile machine with a revolutionary idea behind it. And in that idea, you can see the beginning of a new era, one where the battlefield would never be the same again.